early days of Turo. So, you know, when it was kind of like maybe relay rides when you first joined, what was the kind of marketplace like then, as far as maybe speaking to like the supply breakdown and the user experience as far as renting?
Wow. I mean, it seems like if you've seen that meme where, you know, you're gradually getting more intelligent and at the end, you know, the head explodes with how much you've
Mhm.
learned. Like going back to those days, we just seemed so, I mean, it was a simpler time, but it was a crazy time because we were just trying to prove that people would rent their car out. I mean, that was one of the central things we had to prove,
Yeah.
and that's where a lot of our focus went in just finding product market fit. So the marketplace when I joined was a bit in a transition already. It really started as a peer-to-peer zip car replacement. So people need a car. They're going to run an errand for 15 minutes, an hour, 3 hours, and Relay Rides would install this hardware because who would rent their car out without actually knowing where it is and with the ability to remotely unlock it with your phone and all those things. And so that was our focus, was basically hourly rentals, hardware enabled. And when I joined, they had just introduced a daily rate
Mm.
and had recently introduced the idea of allowing hosts to rent their car out when they're without the hardware installed. And that was a bit heretical at the time. Like, how can you do this? What checks can you make? How can you make sure? And we called that key exchange
Mhm.
as opposed to using the hardware. Now, by just to flash forward to give you some context, we are 100% or 99% key exchange. And that's what allowed us to scale and be nationwide. But we were just daily at the time. And one of our central tensions was, are we a utility like Zipcar? Or are we more like Airbnb and more of a travel and longer term rental? And so one of the things that we did early on was introduced a weekly price. That was insane that we would introduce a weekly price. It would be like Uber introducing a weekly price. That's how crazy it was in our minds. And immediately it was a third of our revenue, like within 2 months. And then we were like, okay, well, let's introduce a monthly rate. And that was immediately 20% of our revenue. And that was, I think, a real turning point for Turo in terms of understanding what we were. Um, and there are other dimensions of it as well. The hardware was extremely expensive and the unit economics were somewhat disastrous. Um, the chances of you getting into an accident with a 2-hour trip are similar to you getting into an accident over the course of a full day, but you'd pay a fraction of that.
Mm.
And imagine having, 3 or 4 trips intraday and how likely it is that you're getting into an accident. And then think about the hardware costs and the hassle for the host to wash the car and deal with it and fuel it and deal with all the mileage and all those different things. So we eased into, over the first 3 years, I was into a more weekend style rentals as being our bread and butter. So that was one big transition. The second big transition was sort of squeezing out some of the idiosyncrasies of our booking process. The way our booking process used to work is, I mean, it was clever and it was, I think, founded on some economic principles, but it wasn't streamlined in terms of consumer principles. And so you would sign up for relay rides. Then you would send out requests, and you could send them out to multiple vehicles. Then hosts would accept those requests. Then you could book the one that you wanted. And in doing so, you had to go through our onboarding, a 3-step process. Let's just leave sign up for a moment and just say you request a car, host accept, and then you book it. Like from my perspective, commerce should be a 1-step process. But the first step was moving to a 2-step process. And that 2-step process was, I want your car, you can have my car. And that was it. And moving to that was basically, I wouldn't say tore the company apart, but it was a huge debate because the company was founded on this other more, interesting, but, frictionful work. And it really took the entire engineering team to rewrite the entire platform. And it was a bet. It was a bet on simplicity and focusing on a retail style experience. The day after we launched, we had our biggest day by like 50%.
Wow.
And so those two changes, the switch from hourly and hardware enabled to sort of weekend multi-day and not hardware enabled, and then also the streamlining of the booking process. Those were two inflection points that ever since then, we've really been on a great path in terms of product market fit. And now we're at a different stage, which is trying to scale. We're in Canada and the UK and just building up the business.